In this video, I want to tell you about a man that had a profound influence on my life. I considered this person a mentor because that's exactly what he was to me. And the first time that I met the man, Joe Bosch, was at Koeberg nuclear power station. And he was a peculiar person. He was different to everyone else. And I must say, I like different. And we actually got off to a very strange start, and then later our relationship grew into one where he took a keen interest in me and taught me many things, not only about the nuclear industry but also about life in general, and had a profound effect on the person that I am today. This is the story of Joe Bosch, someone that I consider a national hero. When I first saw Joe, I couldn't believe that someone of his age and stature would be working on one of the sub-plants within the Koeberg nuclear power station. Now, if you're not a licensed reactor operator working in the main control room, then you're either working on the outside plant. So the plant is divided into sections: the outside plant, the nuclear auxiliary building, the turbine hall, or the waste treatment system. And the first time that I met Joe Bosch is when I went on my second course from outside plant to the nuclear auxiliary building, and I was trained as a nuclear auxiliary building operator, which means I could enter the controlled zone as well as the reactor building, and I had to learn all the systems within that plant, including all the systems around the reactor. And Joe was on my shift, and he was the waste treatment operator. Now, the waste treatment operator at that time, when I got to Koeberg, usually used to be people that were non-licensed, and it was like a career position for them. This is normally where they would stay, and they would be happy until the day they retire. Things changed later on, but that was certainly the case then. So I really experienced and met Joe for the first time after I became permanent in September of 1992 at Koeberg on shift, and then later started working with him early in 1993. When I was in the nuclear auxiliary building, I was qualified to work there, and Joe was the senior nuclear plant operator or the waste treatment operator within that area. Now, he operated in a separate waste treatment control room, and us as the nuclear auxiliary building operators would have our working stations within that control room. He would also supervise us and oversee the work that we did. Now, my first meeting with Joe Bosch was an interesting one when it came to actual work, because I'd seen him many times before in shift meetings, which we had frequently up in the control room. Now, he would never just speak to anybody. He would only speak to you if you either showed interest or if he was interested or specifically involved in something that you had to do. So he was probably not the most approachable person at the time, but during the time that we started working and training in the nuclear auxiliary building, he immediately took an interest because he knew that soon he would have to be working with these people, and he wanted to make sure that they are qualified. I very soon learned that Joe was actually a licensed reactor operator before, and the story that he told me was absolutely profound. Joe was in fact on the first group of people that received their licenses to run the nuclear reactors at Koeberg before the plants were initially started up. So why was Joe a waste treatment operator many pay grades below what a licensed operator would get if he was a licensed operator before? And one day when I gathered the strength to ask him, he told me the full story, and he was very serious when he told me the story. He said that at the time that he did not feel competent to work in the control room, Although he believed that he was the best licensed operator there, he had found out many things that made him believe that he was not good enough and not competent enough to actually run the nuclear reactors. So he laid down his license, handed it back to the National Nuclear Regulator, said that he was the best licensed operator there, but he was not good enough to run the reactors. This was a profound statement and an immense indictment, not just on Koeberg and the organization, but on all the other licensed operators on the 6 different shifts. Remember, there are 2 control rooms, and in each control rooms of the 2 units, there were 3 licensed operators present, as well as a shift supervisor for the balance of plant and the shift manager. So there were a minimum of 8 licensed operators per shift, times 6 shifts made 48 people. So out of all of these people, Joe made this profound statement that he was the best, but that he was not good enough, and handed in his license. Now at the time, you can imagine what an outcry this caused. Joe was not any usual person, and throughout the years, as I got to know him, this became very clear. What Joe set out to do was demand that he be demoted to the position of a senior nuclear plant operator, or someone that actually ran the waste treatment plant and the waste treatment control room, and take a pay reduction. Now this was not allowed under any of the Eskom regulations. So Eskom said that it cannot be done. That you're a licensed operator, you're a supervisor, and that's the role you need to continue in. But Joe had handed in his license, so he could not function in the control room anymore. Not because of a lack of skill, like I said. He knew that he was the best there at the time, or believed that he was the best. So this caused great consternation. Joe started studying law because he was going to take on the giant that is Eskom, and he was going to win. And he did. He took Eskom to court and won that court battle, proving in court that Eskom was not competent enough to train him sufficiently to the level that he believed he needed to be trained to actually run the nuclear reactors. And Joe, in a settlement, was successfully demoted to the level of senior nuclear plant operator, and that is a position he held until he eventually resigned from Eskom and later came back as a contractor on numerous occasions. Joe has sadly since passed on, but there's a lot more to tell about Joe Bosch. He told me the story of how his wife found him, a homeless man, destitute, and actually took interest in him, took him in. And it's fascinating to think that someone that was destitute and homeless could one day become a reactor operator, one of the highest prized acclaims in the nuclear industry, at Koeberg Nuclear Power Station, to be a part of the first team of licensed operators, which was a huge achievement at the time. So Joe was not your average person. He questioned everything, and I am sure that a lot of his character has rubbed off on me over the years. He would question literally everything to a level and detail that I'd never experienced in my life before. I remember the first time we interacted with Joe in the waste treatment control room, and he asked us if we've done our informal rounds already. Now we would normally have to do 3 sets of rounds in a shift. An initial set of rounds, a middle shift set of rounds, and a near end of shift set of rounds, so that the plant's been monitored properly during that time, readings taken, checking for leaks, making sure that motor bearings are running fine, etc. So there's many specific checks we had to do. And obviously it's a lot of complex equipment that we had to monitor. Joe would start asking us random questions just after we qualified. And he realized that we were not up to the standard that he expected from a nuclear auxiliary building plant operator. He subsequently stormed up to the shift manager and demanded that we be retrained, although he had been made active on the plant already. This obviously caused quite a consternation. Our first interaction with Joe was not what we had wanted or hoped for, but he made us feel hopelessly incompetent, and we were. He insisted that the standard of testing be increased and raised, and I wanted to take on the challenge. I asked Joe to train me, and just me not hiding or running from him and asking him to train me changed him instantly. And Joe didn't only start training me about the nuclear auxiliary building and the reactor building, he started training me on waste treatment as well. And he took me under his wing and he became my mentor in the nuclear industry. And I am to this day immensely grateful to him for that. And Joe has since passed on in a car accident. And post his death, I would still like to thank him for the difference that he has made in my life. I remember that we used to give him a nickname. We called him Krusty the Clown. Joe was quite tall, hunched over slightly, and he had this curly hair, this tight, long curly hair. So he was quite a peculiar character, and calling him Krusty the Clown, he absolutely hated nicknames like that. Another thing that Joe hated was dropping gas or farting. Joe would explode like I've never seen anyone explode before. And in the changing room going into the nuclear auxiliary building, it was quite a confined space, and quite a few people had to change into their special overalls that they would wear into the nuclear auxiliary building or the control zone. I once, on one occasion, saw what happened to Joe when someone released gas. Joe turned red like I'd never seen anyone turn red before, and practically flew over the table after this person, because he could not believe that someone would release what he called atomized excrement in his presence. So Joe took everything very literally, and he thought about everything in a very literal way. I remember the first time I switched on a torch to test it inside that very kitchen where we got dressed. And Joe said to me, "Do you know what you just did?" I did not understand what Joe meant. He said, "Do you know what you just did?" I said, "Well, I switched on the torch." He said, "Do you know what that means?" And I started thinking about it a bit more. And he kept on prompting me. Joe wanted me to understand that the switch that I had pushed, what it comprised of, how it worked, what effects it caused within the torch itself, and what the desired outcome was. And he wanted to know if I understood what the desired outcome is. What is this light beam coming out the front of this torch? That is the detail to which he wanted me to understand anything that I touched. So I started thinking about life and everything I did in a completely different way since being exposed to Joe Bosch. And it changed me in a profound way. I cannot relate all the instances of teaching with the great Joe Bosch, but one thing that I can say is that he once actually gave us the waste treatment course and trained me when I got to that level to train us in waste treatment. He was the instructor. And it's the best prepared course that I had ever attended, besides the fact that I knew him. He wanted us to know the plant better than he did. And he insisted that none of us will go active on the waste treatment plant if we did not prove to him that we knew the plant better than he did. And this taught me a valuable principle and something I hold to this very day. And this relates to people with riches. If you are rich, a billionaire, and you are not willing to want to share the secrets and the skills to attain those riches with someone else and or wish it upon them, then you should not possess those riches. Because what Joe taught me is that you must be willing to uplift others at your own expense for society to progress. And this was an immense teaching, not only to me, but the other students that were ever privileged enough to attend these classes. Now, we used to joke with Joe in many different ways and play pranks on him. We would set the clock in the lecture hall forward and backwards to actually gain half an hour either way before and after lunch, because Joe would be set by that clock, and no other instructor in my life had ever set an independent clock like that in the class to make sure that we work exactly to the time. And the people in the class actually took the mickey out of him until they pushed it to an hour and he realized something was up, because in a 4-hour period, losing an hour was quite a lot. So Joe Bosch was a profoundly influential person in my life for all the good reasons. And subsequently he invited me to a project where we actually prepared training material and wrote training material to improve training at Koeberg. One thing that happened after Joe Bosch said that the training for licensed operators were not good enough was an operator enhancement program, where all the operators had to come off shift, one shift at a time, and be retrained for a long period of time. They called that the operator enhancement program, and all the operators had to undergo this to make sure that they are up to a standard that was good enough. One man, Joe Bosch, changed the culture at Koeberg completely. Why? Because it was the right thing to do. Did people oppose him? Everyone opposed him. Did he care? No. That taught me a lot. People used to talk behind his back and say, what is Joe up to now again? But every single one of those people at Koeberg benefited from the actions that he took. Even when people were joking or scoffing and scorning at him. Every person at Koeberg today is benefiting from things that Joe Bosch fought for. For all of them. Better overtime, better salaries, better many different things was all Joe's doing. One person that was willing to stand up against a system run by people that only had their own interests at heart. Secret societies. Joe hated them, wanted nothing to do with them. He believed in the good and the better of the world, because a long time ago, a woman took a chance on him when he had nothing. They got married, they had a son. And sadly, Joe Bosch passed on, and we don't have the presence of his skills and his brilliance with us anymore. I sorely miss him. If I could have anyone to talk to now, I would sit down with Joe and discuss the things that are happening in our country and in the world. And I know that he would be able to give me extremely wise advice during times like this. Not just because he was a brilliant man, but because he cared deeply for everyone in the absence of their support and approval. And I suppose in some ways I've become very much like Joe. I don't need approval for what I'm doing. I don't need anyone pushing me to do what I'm doing. Someone made a comment on my channel today and it was quite hilarious to say, who's funding you? I wanted to say to the person, come and visit me, then you can see who's funding me. He's sitting right in front of you. So people, I just want to say thank you to Joe Bosch. If your wife, your still living wife, should watch this video, Sarah Jane Bosch, just know that your husband made a profound difference in my life. And I thank you for what you did for him, so that he could have the opportunity to touch many other people's lives. Thank you very much.